Good afternoon. Welcome back to another edition of Dojo Live. I am Tulio Sergusa, broadcasting from Southern California, and today is Thursday, February 11th, 2021. This is the last show for the week, and we're excited to speak with our guest. We have had a whole theme about AI this week, and today, I promise you, it will not disappoint. I'm joined today by my co-host, Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Hi, Carlos. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tulio. Appreciate it.
And of course, we want to welcome our guests today. We have Matt, who is with, I'm sorry, who's with, where's the name of the company that we're talking to, guys?
Coiled.
Coiled. Here it is.
I was wondering if you're searching for Coiled or Hugo. So we've got both.
There you go. It threw me off because usually it's the name and then the name of the company. I'm like, that's not Rocklin. We're not talking to Rocklin. We're talking to Matt McRock. And also with Hugo Bowne-Anderson. We're going to be talking to them about interesting topic. But before we get into that topic, Carlos will introduce the show and the topic shortly. Let's get to know you guys a little bit. Please let the audience know who you are. Who'd like to go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I would love Matt to go first. He's
Excellent.
myself.
Thanks for the volunteering. Yes, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I was a software engineer for a long time in the sort of Python open source ecosystem. So you built systems like Jupyter or scikit-learn or Pandas or PyTorch, that sort of suite of tools. I did that for a really long time. I ended up making a software package called Dask, which is useful for parallel computing in Python. It really helps bring a lot of sort of big data and distributed computing to the Python space. I did that for many years as an engineer, and then as like a community manager and a team lead. And then very recently, I went off and made a company with Coiled and some others, or with Hugo and some others called Coiled. And we'll get to that in a bit. Hugo?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Matt. Few relevant things. I'm currently in Australia, so it is Thursday for you, but it's Friday for me. It's Friday morning. That's why I volunteered Matt, in fact, because it's 7 a.m. So I just wanted a few more seconds to gather myself. My background's in scientific research, data science, both in academic basic research, in maths or math, cell biology, physics. Then I moved to industry to work in data science and ed tech. I worked for a company where we taught data science, machine learning, AI stuff online called DataCamp. And there I got really excited to start teaching the open source data stack, both Python and R primarily. And I'm really excited about, I think we're really going through a revolution where open source tools need to be adopted by organizations at scale. In the past 20 years, we've seen tools built by people such as Matt, a lot of scientific researchers, problem solvers, tinkerers, hackers building tools. And I love servicing these tools for everyone to use. And that's one of the reasons that I'm really excited to be building Coiled with Matt, helping open source meet the enterprise. So
great. It's great to get to know you guys. If we did a reel that could roast me on how many times I've forgotten the name of the company that's on the show, it would be a funny reel. So anyway,
awesome.
let's have some fun. So tell us a little bit more about Coiled. How does that come about? What do you guys do? What's the purpose of the company? Tell us a little bit more.
All you, Hugo.
So Matt, I'll volunteer myself this time. We build products for data scientists and data engineers and data professionals to scale their work to the cloud as easily and simply as possible. There's a huge kind of long tail of data tooling space with a lot of options, a lot of different things to do these days, and it's not clear what tools meet data scientists where they are. We know a lot of data scientists use the Python data stack and just want to do their job on the cloud as they do on their laptop. It's very challenging for them to get up and running on the cloud. There's a lot of software engineering chops, DevOps stuff they need to do. So our product essentially is a one-click hosted deployment on the cloud, which allows them to do the data science that they love to do from the ease of their laptop on the cloud.
Is it safe to say that you're disrupting the DevOps space?
I think it's safe to say we're abstracting away a bunch of the DevOps stuff so that data scientists can get back to their real job. Absolutely.
Okay, so before we
Yeah.
get into the topic, quick question: what gave the birth to the name Coiled? What's the history behind that?
There's so we're really strongly steeped in the Python community, and so a lot of the Python companies have snake names. You might be familiar with, for example, Anaconda as a company name. They're sort of I used to work at Anaconda. They're a really strong for-profit Python company. Coiled was sort of like, snakes kind of coil around stuff, and the software we're built on is very much around supporting and sort of interleaving with other technologies as well. So the imagery that we had in mind at the beginning was the I don't know how to pronounce it, but there's the imagery of like the medical symbol,
Right.
cicadas. I've only seen it spelled. I don't know how it's pronounced, but that was maybe the original imagery.
Interesting.
And
I
Matt
wanted
had
to
an
name,
idea. Yeah.
I wanted to name the company Snake Oil, but no one would let me.
Yeah. I love that name, but not for our company, particularly if I'm running marketing.
I could just see it. The head of sales at Snake Oil.
Snake oil
Really.
is very easy to sell.
It is
The
really
head of sales, Snake Oil sales.
God,
Cures all
Okay.
of your oils.
See, we're having fun. All
That
right,
would've been
let's go
fun,
right
yeah.
into the topic. Let's go right into the topic. Carlos, what are we focusing on today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tulio, and thanks, Matthew and Hugo. Tulio, guess what? Open source meets the enterprise. Today, we're going to be speaking about scalable AI for everyone, or we're going to be talking about how to democratize scalable data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So that's the topic that our guests chose for today. So first question that I have for Hugo and Matthew, why did you choose this particular topic for this conversation, and why did you think it was relevant for this day and age? Let's start with that, please. Thank you.
I think it's one of the most pressing concerns of our age. We have a lot of tools being developed that are highly sophisticated, and we have a small proportion of data professionals who can use them currently. So it's something I love to think about, talk about, educate about, is how we can make these tools as widely accessible to people around the world, particularly as we're entering an era where there'll be more and more data work available and needed to be done. So essentially, there's a marketplace of data work, right? And on the supply side, we need to facilitate as many people to be able to do this work as possible to solve a lot of pressing problems. The other reason we chose it is that's what we're doing, right? At Coiled, and what we're excited to do. So
Maybe jump in for a second. So I think we're in a really interesting
Great.
state where a lot of businesses took on sort of software maybe split. There were sort of more enterprise stacks, or sort of Oracle, SaaS, and then sort of Cloudera, Databricks stacks. We're very much designed to solve enterprise data problems. And at the same time, there was this sort of like Python stuff happening, which is originally it was a teaching language. It was designed for academia, it was designed for scientists. It solved everybody's problems, but only on the small scale. And so what we found a lot of organizations is that there was this split where IT and data engineering and DevOps were all heavily Java, Scala, Oracle, SaaS focused, but all the data science, machine learning people were all using this academic stuff. They're all using this Python stuff. And that caused a lot of tension within enterprise. And it was really hard. There wasn't sort of a good middle. So, companies like Databricks are trying to get more into Python, trying to get more into machine learning. And it's just really hard for technical reasons for them. We're going the other direction, right? We're coming from that academic scientific mindset. We're trying to bring that group, which really isn't used to thinking about enterprise at all, trying to bring that group into the enterprise. How do you add security? How do you add auth? How do you add, just communication between these open source communities and these business communities? And that's really, I think, where there's a lot of tension and a lot of really good opportunities too. Scaling up both in a community way and in a technological way, that Python space in enterprise, there's a huge opportunity there, and everybody's feeling that pain today.
So how are you facing that challenge, right? I look at the enterprise who's more interested in competitive advantage, competitive edge, protecting its information. And obviously academia is more interested in collaboration, expanding and growing the knowledge base and sharing that for the sake of continuing to explore and discover new things. Or, as you mentioned, they're in conflict with each other, right? So how?
Right. I mean, if you go to NASA or university, they've got some of
Right.
the same challenges that universities have, right? Like businesses have.
Right.
They just haven't
So how are
carried
you
out.
bringing it? How are you bringing it together? What are some of the challenges you're facing with clients who might pose the question of, "Oh, is this secure?" Blah blah blah. How are you helping? Because you're basically meeting them there, right? Instead of having them come to you, you're meeting them there where they are. How are you helping? And what are some of the challenges you're seeing, and that people might be watching this? I don't know about that. Could overcome with some of the use cases or experience you guys have had.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We're in a good position to do this sort of interplay because we support, or we are strongly tied to Dask, which is this sort of like distributed computing framework. It's kind of like the Spark equivalent inside, or the Hadoop equivalent inside of Python. And so that's really the place where once you start hitting lots of machines, that's when IT needs to get involved. That's when auth needs to get involved. And so we're often the sort of like scientific academic project that is called in first. We're the first major entry point where IT meets this group. And we solve those problems in the same way that a company like Cloudera or Databricks would solve them. Right? We provide an automated software as a service platform that just makes it very easy for organizations. And so as a company, we actually hire not a lot of academic scientific programmers. We hire a lot of DevOps, web infrastructure programmers to make services around Dask. And then Dask ends up bringing in a lot of those extra tooling, right? So you can deploy pandas at scale with Dask. You can do scikit-learn for machine learning at scale with Dask. You can do PyTorch at scale or XGBoost at scale. And so you can do a lot of these other projects, but now with Dask as a sort of entry point into the organization with Coiled.
I got a couple of things I'd like to jump in real quick. First of all, in case this is for the audience, if you're watching and you have a question either for Matthew or Hugo about Coiled or about AI or about anything related to the topic that we're talking about today, send it over. You can send your questions right here on Twitter, right, which is right here. Right. So Twitter at Dojo Live, send your questions. We'll read them back to our guests, and they'll respond right here in real time. Now, question. This is something from the layman's perspective, because Tulio is the one who's got a really, really impressive background in technology. So from the layman's perspective, I'd like to ask you, who's your clients? Who's your ideal client? Who are you targeting? Who are you selling your solution to?
Yeah, so we started mostly selling to IT, mostly in large finance organizations, just because that's kind of who we knew at the time. I was based in New York. We were both based in New York for a long while. And so IT often has that they've been given the mandate of making some kind of machine learning platform for the company. And that works out fairly well. They often need to support GPUs. We do GPUs really well. They need to support machine learning. We do machine learning really well. And they need to sort of, again, bridge that gap between IT and data science. Over time, we've actually found that it's actually a lot easier to target the data science groups instead. They're the ones feeling the pain. And we've also started targeting a lot of smaller groups. They just move so much faster in organizations. And so our classic customer these days is a data science team lead, someone who manages a team of 2 to 10, and they are probably been using Python for a really long time. They've maybe started using Dask a little bit on single machines. They've kind of tried setting it up on their own with Kubernetes on the cloud, and that just kind of hasn't quite worked out for them. It's just it's a bit of a pain. They couldn't do authentication. They couldn't make it secure. It's just taking them a lot of effort to maintain that system. And so they see Coiled, say, oh, that's an amazing user experience. It's where we want to get to in a year. And it's actually really easy to use today. So that's maybe the classic repeat customer that we see over and over again today.
And Matt mentioned finance. Just like to build on that by saying Coiled and/or Dask are used across all different types of verticals, such as retail, supply chain, analytics, meteorology, a lot of basic research, climate research. Of course, NASA uses Dask. So there are a lot of different things at play, which makes it a very exciting space to be building and working in.
So in the financial services space, Python's been used for some time now because they've actually been leading the way in terms of
they've been great.
investments in data science and AI in general. Are you seeing a shift in other sectors, and are those sectors leapfrogging faster because they have access to technologies like this today? What are some of the differences in adapting what you're offering versus doing it the traditional way, which is how banking's done it in the past, right? Is there an opportunity to move faster, scale faster with this for other industries that are perhaps leading or lagging behind? Can you share some use cases there?
Yeah, I mean, just like very broadly, like everybody's using Python, everybody's using machine learning, everybody is leapfrogging their competitors or being leapfrogged, right? I mean, this is the data infrastructure space right now is just cutthroat, right? And it's something everybody is excited about. For reference, I mean, Dask is used everywhere. The Python Software Foundation ran a survey where they ask people what big data frameworks do they use, and 5% of respondents say they use Dask. So any company with about 20 programmers who use Python, odds are someone in that company uses Dask today. So we see this everywhere. You're asking about specific use cases, though. So let's think about that for a second. A fun application these days. I was just on the phone a couple days ago with people who do population genomics. So they're doing genome-wide studies. Think of big pharma, for example, right? They want to figure out. They've got the genomes for 1 million people. They've got what have happened to those 1 million people over time. Did they develop Alzheimer's? Did they develop something else? And they want to run a really big computation to figure out what are some trends. How should we be targeting different medicines to different people? That's the kind of computation that we can do today with Dask, with GPUs, with Coiled, that allow them to just really quickly accelerate their discovery process. We had a nice webinar with someone from where's Eric Ma from, Hugo? Do you want to quickly talk about Eric Ma's use case?
Yeah, Eric Ma's from Novartis. So they do a lot of. I think the example you gave of genome targeting and that type of stuff in order to do drug discovery, among other things, is really cool.
But I mean, there's 1,000 use cases like that. You can go to the energy sector, you can go to telco. Walmart is a heavy Dask user. You guys probably know this better than we do, how often AI is being used in the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely challenges, right? That some companies still face, especially when it comes to scaling or distributed environment. Getting access to the data has been historically a challenge, which is why cloud computing has really accelerated, because it eliminated that. So technologies or platforms like Coil further accelerate, as I understand it, that ability to scale and get access to distributed sets of data to make those kinds of decisions, which sometimes get lost in the translation because of the historical way that things used to be done, which were very dependent on networking infrastructure or private infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing now with more acceleration and more adoption as you're seeing? What are some of the opportunities that are presenting themselves that you're kind of seeing for yourself? I'm curious where you have the finger on the pulse of what's happening or trends that are happening. We're curious to learn what you're discovering as people are adapting more of this.
Specifically about sectors, you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just curious which sectors seem to be making some strides, that are not the banking or financial service. We know they've been using this for a long time. Is healthcare, you mentioned healthcare a little bit, is that one of the major sectors that's adopting this now? Or they could be adopting this?
It's tricky, because we don't really see trends. Like we're kind of broad based. Ask yourself the question: who uses Python today? Is it finance? Is it somebody else? Like it's everybody, right? We talk to government, we talk to energy, we talk to IoT, we talk to heavy industry. Like there's not like a clear trend to like report to you. One of those is pharma. We can go into other ones too. Right, energy is a really common sector that we see. Our technology is kind of uniquely able to capture not just tabular data, the kind of thing you'd find in a database, but also data that's multidimensional, the kind of thing you'd think of, in an oil field or in a water table, something that's, latitude, longitude, depth, time. It's much more complex. And so there's actually a lot of interest in that space. Preventative maintenance is another big one. So, heavy industry, government, anybody with a lot of large, expensive machines, right? They've got incredible time series coming off of these things. And just analyzing all of that data allows them to much more quickly and cheaply replace parts, figure out when things will break. It gets them out of sort of regular maintenance cycles and allows them to do preventative maintenance with a bit more thought. But,
and these companies are adopting open source, because that's really the quirks of this, right? That's the challenge. Technology companies have adopted open source a long time ago, but at private enterprise have not always jumped on the bandwagon right away, right? So are you seeing more of that? Because that's what you're talking about, right? Democrats moving or pushing towards open source for this kinds of applications.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about democratization is that it doesn't require the companies to make a decision. It happens in a bottoms up rather than a top down motion.
Got it.
Went to the CIA or Shell or Ford or any large conservative organization outside of finance, I can 100% guarantee you that there are people that are using Python, people that are using Dask, but it's not mandated. It's not like a top-down decision. It's not like they chose to use Python the same way they chose to use IBM. Just like Python was available, someone installed it on the laptop, and they've been using it for a long time. Now that it's everywhere, those IT departments are saying, hey, how do we support this thing? Like our business already runs on it. We didn't realize it. Now, how do we actually put some controls around that? How do we stop these engineers from just going and throwing services on our infrastructure? How do we start to control this thing that's already here? And that's really, I think, where companies like ours come into play, because we know the users. We've got a huge amount of user empathy. We also fully understand the problems they're facing with, right? I mean, we work in government, we work in finance, we work in healthcare, we work in these very intense enterprise environments, and really bridging that gap is interesting. So we're not trying to like sell them on open source. They've realized they've bought open source accidentally, in the same way that a kid bought a bowl of candy.
Exactly. But one thing we are doing is that there are so many, as Matt said, so many open source users within organizations across the board. But for organizations to be comfortable adopting that at scale and making it a foundational principle, which they want to do, they need someone to sign an SLA, essentially, among several other things, right? But they need companies such as Coiled to rise up from the open source to meet them in order to work with them. So that's one of the reasons for being of Coiled as well, to make sure that the enterprise can adopt the open source at scale.
Got it. So you can't fight the movement, join them. Make it easier to manage it. So because your people are doing it anyway. So as an enterprise, you might as well, don't fight the movement, join it, make it simpler, adopt it. That's brilliant. Love it. Carlos, I think you had some a follow-up question as well.
Yeah, actually, yes. Thank you, Julio. Well, it's my question is more related to Coiled itself, and this is because we're approaching the final segment of today's conversation. So before we go, I'd like to ask you about Coiled, and we might have folks out there as viewers who might be watching it and might want to know more about a Coiled, either to reach out to you, maybe to be part of your team, or about anything else. What would you say to these people who might tell them about the culture of the company? What is important for you in terms of what's really what makes Coiled a fun company, or a company that others might want to go work for as it grows? Is there anything you can share with us and with the audience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most exciting things we're doing currently is we're growing quite quickly. So anybody who's joining at the moment actually gets to impact the culture in a really serious way. So if you're interested in joining a company where you will have an impact on internal culture, I think that would be fantastic, and we'd love to hear from you. The other relevant thing is that when Matt and I first started talking about Coiled, this was before, it was pre-COVID, and Matt said, I want to make a 100% distributed remote company. So this was baked into the foundation of the company. There are, of course, serious challenges that arise with that, challenges we're all dealing with, but this is something we've been really mindful and cognizant of from the get-go, and we're really excited to figure out how to solve some of these challenges as well. So culture is definitely a work in progress. It's, as I'm sure you all are aware, it's really challenging to meet people and hire people and work with people when you've never met them in real life. But these are things we're definitely working on and excited to figure out. The other thing we're doing, and we're about to publish a blog post on this, is how our culture is arising from the principles of the open source as well, in terms of collaborative culture, in terms of decentralized efforts, federated structures, these types of things. So keep your eye out for that on coiled.io/blog as well.
Yeah, if I were just to double click on that briefly, I think what I'm really interested in is this interplay between the open source community mindset and the business mindset, and how to bring the both of those two things together. And there's a lot of tension to really dig in there and play with. And there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think a company that's kind of has one foot in both and trying to balance that, it's a fun place to work, right? It actually requires people who are a little bit mission driven, but also, have their feet firmly planted on the ground. And that, I think we've found a lot of people who sort of fit that mold, and it's a really exciting group to play with. So if you sort of like that construction of how to think about making organizations that work and serve humanity at the same time, it's a fun place.
Absolutely. Sounds like it. Well, so as we come upon time, we're getting ready to wrap up. One final question for both of you. Is this your first startup? I don't recall if this was your first startup or you've done a few before.
We've both worked in startups, but this is definitely our first time throwing ourselves on the sword, belly
Yeah.
front.
Yeah. Great. So we often want to ask startup entrepreneurs, what's that journey been like? And any words of wisdom you have for those who are still not willing to jump on the sword yet? Anything you'd like to share with those, your journey, what that's been like, things you've learned about yourself in the process as we wrap up would be great.
There are so many things to say. The one thing I'll say is that it's incredibly exciting, but it's a different company every 2 weeks. So get ready for that.
A different company every 2 weeks. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, you grow so quickly, you bring on different clients, working with different people. Yeah. I mean, we've grown from 6 to nearly 20 in a matter of months. So
it's different. I mean, to expand on, it's a different set of jobs every month or two. Like, I don't think I've ever felt comfortable in my job in the same way that I used to as an engineer or as a team lead, right? Whenever I figure something out, I pass it off to someone else and I do a new job. And that's it's an amazing learning experience. But also, I've got less hair now than I used to. I wrote a blog post just a few weeks ago, I think, on a 1-year sort of personal anniversary. And that goes through a little bit of what those last 12 months have been like and what it's like from a personal level too. So that's on our blog at coiled.io/blog if people are interested.
Excellent. We'll have to check it out. Always interested to hear different perspectives and stories. So what I heard is get ready to take your multiple personality medications when you're doing a startup, because it's every 2 weeks.
Or not, actually. Don't take it. Yeah, then you'll do a great job.
Just embrace it.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, it's been great to have you guys on the show. Thanks for enlightening us. It sounds like you're making a significant impact in democratizing data science and AI and putting it into the user's hands and enabling enterprises to adopt it easier instead of, challenging it. So good for you. Great to have you on the show. Just stay with us as we go off the air.
Thank you so much for having us.
Carlos, what do we got coming up next week? We've got the recap show on Monday.
We got the recap show, right?
We're going to recap this week's shows, and then what else we got coming up?
Tuesday, we're going to be speaking with Keith Abramson, principal of electronic with NEEK, a robotics company with a lot of really cool tech that they're featuring. And also, we're going to be speaking with Jordan Wexler from EasyBird on the topic of EasyBird is a platform and a fintech platform and how to invest in the next generation. So that's the two topics that we have for next week right here on Dojo Live, Tuesday and Thursday at 12 noon Pacific. Don't miss it. Stay safe, everyone. And thank you, our guests today.